Yo.
Welcome back to BeRAD the Pod with Kat and Carson. Cheese.
Hey, what's up?
So what's up? What's going on?
Oh, living life.
Yeah.
Went surfing this morning. It's really fun.
How was it?
Went for a run with the dogs yesterday. It was really warm. I feel like winter is leaving.
I know. The waves are smaller. The weather's hotter.
Yep. I'm sweating profusely on every 1 mile that I run.
I know. I mean, I went walking with Anna this morning, my sister, and oh my gosh, it was hot.
Yeah. It's warm out there.
Yeah.
So what's up? What's going on with you? How's life? How's training and everything?
Well, I am heading to Flagstaff tomorrow for a 2-week training camp. I'm going to do some canyon miles, which I'm really excited about. I actually haven't run in the Grand Canyon since I set the FKT in 2017.
Really? Wow.
That's not true. I had to do a photo shoot there in 2019 when I was with Solomon, but
Wow, that's exciting.
I know. I'm really excited. It's supposed to snow though, so.
Are you going to go rim to rim to rim?
Probably not. That's my biggest run that I have scheduled is 6 hours, and that would be breaking the female FKT by an hour and a half. So
if you sent it.
Yeah, so probably not this time.
Yeah, that needs to be planned out.
Yeah, maybe one day
That's
though.
essentially a race effort, right?
Oh yeah, that's an all-out effort to get that.
That's a really competitive FKT.
Yeah, super competitive. When I did it, it was definitely a race effort. But it's so crazy to think about then, because I did that whole 42 miles with 1 gel or 2 gels.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Which was how many hours? Like 8 or 9?
It's like 7.5.
Oh.
Yeah.
Damn, I would die.
I know. I think that's why I was so wrecked.
Were you bonking?
I think so. I think I didn't quite recognize what bonking was at the time because I was so underfueled all the time.
You're just young and dumb and underfueled and like full of extra energy.
Yeah, and angst.
Yeah, the angst can fuel you, huh?
Yeah, the angst really fueled me a lot.
Until you break yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I was like so angsty and then I broke.
Oh, man. Yeah, so anyways, today, thank you all for giving us your opinions on what we should talk about with the podcast. It's been really cool to hear your perspectives and your feedback. And also, we're going to utilize some of it today. I am actually going to interview Kat a little bit about ultra running because, if I wasn't here living it with her, I would be really so curious about what exactly it is that you do and how you got started. And then, before I really came into your world and started understanding ultra running, I was really curious and I had no idea. I was literally like, wait, they pay you to run?
I know. Far? I was telling him, I was like, yeah, I'm a sponsored athlete, thinking I'm flexing on this guy that I've been in love with since high school. Yeah, I'm a professional runner for Brooks. And he was like, they pay you? Why? And I was like, oh God. I should just shut my mouth.
No, I mean, it just shows how ignorant I was. And I know that there's professional athletes out there. I didn't know how the industry worked. I was like, okay, well, I understand how other industries work, but you can literally just run. You can do an FKT and be a really fast runner up a mountain and just they'll pay you for this project, because you were talking about doing different projects and people would sponsor those projects, and that was totally beyond me. I didn't understand how it worked at all. And over the past several years, I have been more and more involved with you and with doing media and covering certain events and other companies that work in the ultra running space.
Yeah.
So now I understand it a lot more. But, there's still things that I am still curious about, because maybe I have never asked them. And also in this kind of public podcast, I'm curious what your answer will be.
I know, I'm nervous.
It's really fascinating when somebody devotes their life to one specific goal for me.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm I'm kind of a jack of all trades in a lot of ways. I love to do a lot of different things. And so it's always been hard for me to like really zero in on one specific goal and stay at that goal and keep hammering away for years and years and even decades. So, you know, that's a pretty unique thing, in my opinion, that you do, even if it, no matter what it was. But the fact that it's ultra running to me is even more interesting.
Yeah, totally. I did find like a little niche and really hammer away at it.
Yeah. A really long running niche.
I know. I sometimes think like I definitely could have chosen an easier thing, and I'm like so freaking stubborn. I probably could have made it work, but I chose the hardest thing.
Yeah. And you know, maybe you're so stubborn that you crush it at the hardest thing.
Yeah, that's
because
probably
you're
true.
so stubborn.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, and then after we interview Kat, we're going to also go into some of those questions that you all had.
I know, we got
from her Instagram.
Yeah, thank you guys. I kind of put it out there like, hey, we're podcasting. What are your questions? Because I've been listening to more and more podcasts out there, and I thought that format was so cool. And there's some really fun questions out there. Like, shout out to one of my favorite ones that I've heard that I've actually relayed to a couple people. And so keep giving them to us, make them fun, make them weird, but also like things that you're genuinely curious about. But shout out to the Boulder Boys. I was listening to their podcast. And one of the listener questions was, would you rather speak in an accent, the Jar Jar Binks accent for the rest of your life? Or would you rather be on a pogo stick for every time you went to the bathroom or did anything for the rest of your life? And like, I loved that question. I've actually asked several people that, including my training partners here. And it's made some miles go by. So super fun. Keep it up. But we're going to answer some of your questions at the, I picked like, you know, several to go through out of the many. So keep them up.
All right. So the interview.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, Kat, why did you start ultra running?
Yeah, I mean, I really loved running. I kind of started running even before I was in track and cross country in high school. Just going out for little runs around the neighborhood. I remember like getting ready to go for a run. There was actually like one of my earliest memories of running is that like I was probably in like 5th grade or something. And I wanted to go running because there was this beautiful part back in the neighborhood that I lived in where there was like a little trail and it was super forested. It was beautiful. And there was this loop. It was probably like 1.5 miles or something. And I wanted to go back there, and turns out a child molester lived back there. So it was like a big deal. My dad was like, don't go back there. I'm like, but it's so pretty. I just want to go run.
In your head, you're like, I could outrun him.
Yeah. I mean, I probably like didn't understand the consequences then, you know.
Yeah, that's extreme.
Yeah. But, and then ultra running, I remember I was in between college and high school and was, you know, about to go run track at UCSB and was really trying to find my way, was struggling. And I was working at a restaurant, Texas Roadhouse, and working at this general store. I was in Rhode Island staying with my mom. And I was like going to hiking clubs, just trying to get on trails. And I didn't quite know why yet. I thought it was beautiful and I just wanted to explore stuff and I didn't quite know where to start. And I ended up like looking for trails online. I started reading this blog about the North to South Trail in Rhode Island. And then I, you know, going down the wormhole, I found some guy that had done the whole thing and had set the FKT in like 18 hours and it was 80 miles. And I went to my mom and my godmother, specifically, my mom was like, do whatever. And I was like, from reading this, I was like, oh, you have to have crew. And I went to my godmother, Cherry Arnold, and I was like, please, can you crew me for this? And she said, yes. And then she started reading about it and then realized it was 80 miles and it was going to take all day and night. And it's actually the only fight she and I have ever gotten into, because I'd been like training for it, by training for it, I was like, not really. I did sections of it a couple times. And where I'd like get destroyed and have to hitchhike back to my car. And yeah, that's how I got started. And I made it like 40 miles of that or something. Before Cherry, I was like hobbling and Cherry was like, enough, get in the car. I was like,
your godmother was just seeing you destroy yourself, and she decided to call it.
I did it in a pair of Nike Frees, which notoriously injure athletes.
Wow.
Yeah, they're like gym shoes.
So you just heard about somebody doing this extreme effort on a nearby trail, and you decided that you wanted to try it also.
Yeah.
Did you know that there were 100-mile races at the time? Like, have you heard of them?
Yeah, I read Born to Run.
Okay.
And so I knew they existed, but it wasn't until I just was in Rhode Island working, and I just was craving adventure, a lot. And so that's kind of how I got started. Now that I know what, our whole last episode was about crewing, and how hard it is, and we started the episode talking about how crewing is harder than running, and I believe that. But if I had known, I think it's just like one of those things that I was so ignorant, you have no clue. Yeah. And so I was so eager to do this thing, and so I mean, man, I still have it in me, that fire, and I think it's just like more focused, but I was so passionate. It like was a really, really bright flame that I almost couldn't control it. Thank God I got into something good, because I just had so much want to do stuff and want to explore. And like, thank God running was the thing, because I think if I chose something else, even something like music, where sometimes the drinking culture is really high, I think I would have been, gone down a different, worse wormhole, because I was just so intense about everything that I did. Yeah. So, initially, the thing that really lit that fire, was it the feeling of adventure, or was it the goal of wanting to compete against other people, or was it something else entirely? So, I always knew I was a good runner and I did want to compete, but I think the initial spark that got me was adventure. I craved adventure. Like, in that same time, I was like considering going to Patagonia, and I had everything lined up, but it just didn't feel quite right. And I was like, okay, maybe I can send it to Patagonia and do a year there learning how to be a mountaineer. Or maybe what was it? Oh yeah. And then I was like, and again, I was just like desperate to find like-minded people. So I like met this guy, who obviously it turned out to be ill intent on his part. But I was like, he talked about he was going to Costa Rica, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to go to Costa Rica. I want to do this. I want to like adventure and backpack in Costa Rica. That sounds amazing. So I started like talking to this guy and I was just looking for a travel buddy, and he was like looking for something more, but I was so eager that I like started planning a Costa Rica trip, and I started like really thinking about it, because you can travel there so quickly, so cheaply. And so I think it was the thing for adventure. But, what really got me thinking about performance was Luis Escobar, who, when I was in Santa Barbara, I basically like moved into him and Beverly's house for a long time, on and off for months.
He's relatively famous, and they mention him a lot in that book, Born to Run. So.
Totally. And especially in that era. Did you know
about him before you met him?
I didn't connect the dots until later.
Okay.
But yeah, I went on this trip. So Luna Sandals invited me to come to their grand opening in Seattle. And we were doing this like cool run in the Cascades. And I overheard him say to Patrick Sweeney that I could be really good, and that he said I could be really good.
Wow.
And, honestly, I knew it before, and that seed was starting to grow in me. But that lit the fire.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty cool. But the funny thing is once I was like, what'd you say? He was like, shut up, kid. Turn around. You didn't hear anything. I'm like, you sure?
That's how you know it's sincere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will never forget that. And he also, talk about somebody who's powerful is he also, when I was running Western the day before, he was like, you're going to win this. And
wow.
that, yeah. And so he kind of has called a bunch of stuff, and super cool.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. That's a really cool background on your running career. And yeah, ultra running versus running. In the end of the day, it's all running.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of running.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, one thing I wanted to ask about was as a kid, you said you ran a little bit, starting in 5th grade. And then I saw you run through high school and actually do really well in cross country and track. And you always loved it. And so, but what made you try it in the first place? Why do you think you fell in love with it as a kid?
Yeah, I can't remember I can't remember why I wanted to do it as a kid. I think a part of it was that sense of adventure too. Mm-hmm. I wanted to see stuff. I really loved, I was always really drawn to mountains and forests and just wanting to explore them. And I almost romanticized it, I want, any forest that we pass, I just want to go see what was in there. And I think that's a nature of part of that's being super comfortable in the water and at the beach. And I wanted to see something else. And, so I think it was just, and then I also think, I come from a big family. There's 4 of us kids, and I was always craving independence. And I think also it was just a way for me to have some quiet. You know me now as I'm pretty introverted, and I love my time by myself. And I think that a part of me was also craving that. Yeah.
You wanted to get out and get away into the wilderness kind of, and be by yourself with nature.
Totally. But in high school, I had to run cross country because I was immediately in the first couple weeks of school getting in trouble a lot. and basically I was given an ultimatum, join us, you got to join a sport, or you're gonna, I immediately started skipping class. Join a sport, or you're just gonna get a lot of demerits, and you're gonna have to work them off. And I was like, okay, I'll do a sport. And I got cut from the JV volleyball team. And so I joined cross country, and then was, immediately pretty good, which was, and then so, I fell in love with it almost immediately.
You were pretty good at it, and you just latched onto it.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too, is I come from a super athletic family, and my sister is so athletic, and any sport that she's ever done that we've done together, she's been better at me than. And so I think for the first time, it felt really good to be good at something. So I was like, so I think that was a part of it too. I was like, oh, I love being good at something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels so good to be good at something.
I know. It was cool. Awesome. And I think that's the first time I'd really felt that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's for me, it's I always really wanted it for the similar sense of adventure and a little bit of a family background and semi prepping. Okay, what's the most valuable sport that I could have if there's a zombie apocalypse? Well, I could run 20 miles and then maybe save myself and my friends and family. So I was like, why not? That seems like a pretty valuable sport. And I agree. I mean, I still think it's super valuable because it's nice to be able to run really far if you want to / need to. I rarely need to, admittedly, but almost never actually need to for life and death situations. But
now
it's fun too.
Yeah.
And you get to experience such cool places and go to interesting things and go on crazy adventures, which is so valuable.
Yeah, it is. And I think that pull of adventure versus performance is something that always weighs on me, still to this day, because like, do I want, my training now these days is like super regimented, which I really enjoy. I love that aspect. I love just following a plan and doing it and executing. But, that adventurous piece in me is still there. But I think now the adventure is almost seeing how like, what am I made of? And I think that's an adventure too.
Yeah. That's really cool. So, while you're doing these adventures and, you devoted yourself to these extreme adventures, ultra running races specifically, which is basically, when I think about that, it's probably the most difficult thing you can devote yourself to.
Also surfing is very difficult.
No. We're talking about you. Ultra running. I did a 100K race. That's the farthest I've ever run. And that was without a doubt the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So I know that when you're doing these things at a faster pace and for longer, I know that it's there's no doubt that it's really, really hard, these races. And so, I know what I feel like is the hardest part. What do you feel like is the hardest part of the sport of ultra running?
That's a good question.
The sport, and I'll ask more specifically about like specific races, but like the sport in general, like existing in the sport, competing in the sport year after year and being in the game. What do you think is the hard, like, or at least a couple of the hardest parts?
Yeah. So I think the constant thing is choosing to do what you don't want to do. And sometimes I do want to do it, but it comes like, when you're 2/3 of the way through this race and you have to press the pace still, and everything is telling you to slow down, or not eat the gel, and you say you're super nauseous and you just have to eat the gel, and like, you don't care if you puke or not, I hate being nauseous until and it's like those constant decisions of going against what everything is telling you to do. Or like even in training, like sometimes I do, like yesterday I cut my run about an hour short because I was like, okay, I have a giant week next week. I really want to feel fresh. But it's those times of being like, oh, I'm so tired. I feel like I have a run hangover today. And all I want to do is hang out with you and the dogs in the morning and drink a coffee, have a slow morning. And I have to, again, for the third day in a row, wake up, drive 45 minutes to the trail I run, get all my, now I know more about nutrition. It's a huge pain. I'm drinking 4 liters of water for 4 hours. So I have to pack all my 90 grams of carbohydrates, and it's just the constant press of it doesn't really ever let up because am passionate and I want to do it. And I do, I also love the process and I wouldn't choose anything, but there's just like some days or some periods at a race where I'm like, where I'm like, man, how nice would it be to be a normal person that like when they go on vacation, just vacations, or, does house projects or gardens on a Saturday, or even just be like one of those people who are like, I just want to be out here for the adventure of doing this 100 miles in a beautiful place and is okay with eating all the snacks and is okay with, and I think that is the hardest part of like constantly pressing. And it is, they say athletics is a 24/7 job, and it really is, because I'm constantly thinking about performance.
Yeah. It's down to like how much you're going to sleep every night, whether you
go surfing with you or not. That's a big one that I hate saying no to all the time.
Yeah.
But it really impacts the way that I run the next day or like sometimes the next week. And it really tires me out. And if I have to do a hard run and, it like every time I say no, it eats another piece of me a little bit, but then the times that I can say yes, like last night, it makes me so happy, so there is, and having a good run and feeling good. Like I felt great on my run yesterday because I didn't surf on Friday night with you, like we planned. So I think that is the hardest part, is just like the saying no all the time.
Yeah.
And the constant pressing.
Really just continually and making sure that's your top priority and
yeah,
keeping it in your mind.
And even when other people don't understand it, you know, I feel, especially when I'm around people who aren't you or who aren't in the sport at all and just like don't understand it, they just think I'm insane, you know, and explaining to somebody like, yeah, I got, you know, a 20-mile run tomorrow, so I have to be in bed this time, you know, doing that over and over again to people. It's just like, it's exhausting.
Well, like I said, like that devotion to one goal is abnormal for most people. And so it probably comes off as like a little like manic or like obsessive, you know.
And it is obsessive. It completely is obsessive.
Yeah.
You know, I think my friend Kelly posted about it. It's like they, you know, or I don't know, it's maybe a classic thing. It's like everybody wants the medal and nobody wants all of the work. And like, I even will take that further, is that like the work is one thing. The work is actually the easy part, but it's managing all the details outside the work. That's really hard. And I think that's what is the difference between good and great, is just, it's not just the little things like doing the PT. It's, again, it's, you know, we're stubborn athletes. Everybody is good about doing those little things, but it's like this, I think the difference between good and great is the saying no to stuff.
The discipline.
Which
is like such a buzzword right now, because it's true. It's like, if you have the discipline and you are able to consistently make the right choices to get to your goal day in and day out, that's really what makes you the extra 1% between 99 to 100.
Yeah. Like the getting to bed early, you know, and being like, okay.
Being able to stop Star Wars in the middle of the crux of the movie and be like, okay, it's bedtime. I'm like, what, are you joking, dude? Dude, we're like, like Luke and Vader are about to go down in a lightsaber battle, and you're ready to go to bed?
I'm like, but I have 6 by 8 minute hills tomorrow.
Yeah, but you know, it's impressive though, and that's how I think, like, that's really what it takes to be the best. So I applaud you.
Thank you. Thanks for doing it with me. Because sometimes, you know, when I'm going to bed, you most of the time have to go to bed with me.
Yeah. But, you know, I always like waking up early and having a productive morning the next day.
Yeah. Another example of this is like, I just had a call with Vic Johnson, my dietitian, and he works, you know, for people who don't know, he works with all of the elite athletes right now. He's in the last year has just taken over the ultra scene because he's really good. And so he was telling me, I love Laird's superfood creamer, which is basically just like coconut fat. I don't know what it is, but he was like, dude, you cannot eat that much fat.
It's like coconut sugar. It's basically just coconuts. Like, that's mostly what it is.
Yeah. And it's these like fine-tuned tweaks to my diet too, where he's like, okay, well, can you replace it with, I mean, it's not so much of a compromise because he's like, replace it with maple syrup, but it's like, you know, not putting butter on my oatmeal like I usually do. And these are, you know, he's like, you got to cut it with the butter. And it's just like the constant little tweaks, like how can we get the most out of ourselves? It's honestly, it's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, the sport's come a long way. When you started ultra running about 10 years ago, it was like, you know, people were still mostly eating like sweet potatoes while they did these epic long runs.
Yeah, everybody had a different strategy, but I think the main strategy was eat as little as you possibly can to get by.
Yeah, and now it's like the science is out, and you kind of like know how to perform your best and how to recover your best, which all plays a part. Yeah. So it's really cool. But yeah, got to keep that discipline. So the next question is, you know, you've done a lot of races. You've had a lot of great races, a lot of races that seem like so brutal and terrible.
Terrible.
What's the hardest thing that you can remember, or, you know, a couple of the hardest things you can remember going through in a race?
I mean, I think the hardest thing is when you have a little injury, or in some cases, in my case, like a big injury that you're just trying to ignore. And then you start the race and you're faced with the decision to, I mean, like, it's not even a decision sometimes, where like you have to DNF. And I'm really liking that DNFing is being more normalized, but I just went through years of being like, fingers crossed my body holds up, and it got less and less often where it would hold up. It'd be like a freak incident where it would hold up. And navigating that, just again, just like I would gaslight myself into being like, you are just being weak, you are like, how dare you DNF? And this is terrible, but I'd be like, I was always so afraid of being that person that would DNF when it got hard. And so when I would DNF, I would be like, oh my God, that just happened. And I'd forget that I was limping. And I think that is some of the hardest decisions I've made and the hardest fallouts that I've had, There is, no matter why you DNF, there's grief there. And, I think for some people it's a lot easier to cope with. And I think as I have matured as an athlete, it has gotten easier for me. But it is, you put so much into these races, and having to pull is really, really hard. And you start to question everything and why you're doing this. And am I making up this pain in my head? Am I, because, I have those thoughts during races, and it's starting when I was running cross country in high school. Like, this hurts. Maybe I should just trip, and be like, ow, because it hurts so bad. And I never did. But the fact, it's just really hard to look yourself in the mirror the next day or in the days after, especially when it becomes a string of DNFs, to figure out what's what, and to believe yourself and believe your symptoms.
So how do you overcome that?
I think, you were a great sounding board for me, because, you'd see the injury outside the actual running. Like, you'd see me like limping when I cross the street. So that was really helpful, just to be like, no, you idiot, Like
differentiating the problem, like you taking all the blame and thinking like, I'm the problem, versus me seeing like, no, your injury that you sustained after getting hit by a truck, for instance, is the problem. And you need to fix that to be better.
Yeah. And I think also something that has helped me, that was probably the catalyst because that made me, that was the catalyst for recovery, is you being like, you dumb idiot, you actually are injured. It's obvious. But the growth that happened afterward was me untangling self-worth, like my total self-worth, with running, and being, I think after the injury and after I was able to run again, that first year was really tough. 2023 was really tough, but like 2024 was maybe the happiest year of my life, even though I wasn't performing well. And I think that would have never happened without the hip injury and that basically year off, because I had a year off and life went on, and I think that's the thing, is life goes on, and it was really fulfilling and amazing after I worked through some stuff.
Wow. Cool. That's really, that's fascinating to hear.
Yeah.
So you kind of just touched on that a little bit, but, maybe you'll have another perspective on this question. So sometimes it seems like athletes have such an incredible trajectory to greatness. And, from the outside, you started running, you ran a few big races, and then like shortly after, like you win Western States, which is the most competitive 100-miler in the country. But obviously it's hard to see all the hard and sad, like difficult aspects when things are often glamorized online, or like the press gets hold of the good news, and then they don't cover the athlete who's like going through a hard time, or maybe not not performing. So what's like a difficult part of ultra running that you didn't expect getting into it?
That's the thing getting into it is I didn't have many expectations. Like you said the other day when we were talking about skydiving, I'm more of a jump first type of person and then think,
Yeah.
To put into context, we went skydiving and I was not scared at all.
Yeah.
Didn't even think about it until I was, the second I got scared was when I started falling. So I'm already out of the plane and I just get racked with terror. I wasn't scared at all up until that point. So I think I didn't have any expectations going into ultra running. I just wanted it. I just knew what I wanted. And then similar to skydiving, like when I got Western States, I just wasn't, the come down was so hard. I said my goal out loud. I was like, I'm going to win Western. And then the years after was me trying to prove to myself and everybody that was legitimate. And that was tough.
Yeah. Did you expect that? Like, that's probably the last thing you'd expect is like, once you win a big race, the come down afterwards.
Yeah, I didn't, and I think maybe if that had happened now, I might, just because I have a lot of years of coaching under my belt and I have a lot of friends who've won Western and am more in tune with the industry and high performers. But I think, I don't think I expected that. I don't think I thought about the day after. And then the years after, and that was tough. And I think that was, I think it all goes into that. What's the hardest thing that you deal with in ultra running? And that is the, decisions you make to make yourself good. And I felt like I was under so much pressure that I was making all the wrong decisions, I was just white knuckling through every day for years. And I think, I forget what the question was, but I didn't. That was unexpected, the lows. I'd say also something unexpected about running is one of the reasons I was drawn to it was the simplicity. And the longer these distances get and the more science and information that we have around the sport, the more complex it is and the more gear we need. Literally before I go out for a run, I need at least 3 gels. I need a heart rate monitor. I need something that measures my sweat and my salt. I need what pair of shoes am I wearing for what terrain? So I think that is something on a more practical level that's unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah, you're really dialing it in.
Yeah.
But the come down from big race is something that I hear a lot about. And would you say that every athlete experiences that, even if they're not like in the elite pack?
Yeah, every single one of my athletes, even if, I'll talk to them, we'll do a race debrief and usually they're still on that high, it'll be a couple days after the race and I'll warn them. I'll be like, even athletes who've been in this for years, I'll warn them like, hey, just so you know, the next couple weeks might be tough. Don't run from it. Listen to your body, keep in touch, keep an open dialogue. Know that this isn't you, that a big part of this is just hormonally. Your body doesn't have enough to just like produce the correct amount of serotonin. So you're going to feel kind of sad. And every single time I just had this with an athlete, they're like, yeah, I feel great. Like, no problem. I think I got it this time. And then, one of two things, I either won't hear from them for a month because they're just sad. And, when people are sad, especially with the running, the coach athlete relationship, they'll start to withdraw. Or I'll hear from them like every second of every day for the next month, just freaking out. Why do I feel this way? I feel awful. I feel tired. I'm sad. So that's probably pretty unexpected too. And it happens, I swear to God, every single one of my athletes.
Well, basically you're overutilizing every resource that you have available to you in your brain and in your muscles. Like every store that you have is basically being depleted. So afterwards your serotonin is fucked. Your dopamine probably, I don't know all the specifics, but like, and the energy stores that you have in your glycogen in your muscles is totally obliterated. So
and I feel like
you have zero energy.
Totally. And a big part of that too is for months, and that's not physiological, is that for months and months and months, you've had this one goal on the calendar. You're doing it every day, is structured around this one goal.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden you've got a couple weeks where you're just kind of cut loose, you know, and you're not super structured around the goal. You know, you don't have that thing that's driving every day. You know, think about how my days are structured. Everything is structured around when I run, you know, and think about how I was after Thailand when I had 2 weeks off running. I felt lost.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a big part of it too.
Being unstructured makes me feel lost too.
Yeah.
You know, like not having a job and not knowing what your next move is going to be.
Yeah, not
like
having
where
a
to go
goal.
next.
And I think even for people outside of running, you know, who are just clocking in, clocking out and don't have a goal, I think they are lost and they don't realize it. So I think having a goal no matter what, you know, like you have some really cool work goals right now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of driving you, you know.
Yeah.
And
before those, it was kind of hard because I didn't, you know, I didn't know what my next step was going to be. And like, it's kind of hard to decide that when I don't have as like focused of a goal as you. Like you have your one giant goal of like be the best ultra runner on the planet, you know? And like, that's like that's a pretty straightforward goal. And, for me who like, I like to do like so many different things. And you know, I've tried to run my whole life, but I never saw success in it from an early age like you did.
But also you weren't like, I think the thing that you would have that's like me is like surfing. You know, you weren't, you loved running and you loved racing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't think it's the same. You know,
Totally.
And I think people just like click with some stuff or don't. And I think you clicked with surfing, but it's not as accessible as running, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I had been surfing basically my whole life, except where my family lived, it was like a little bit further away from the surf and I couldn't just go all the time. Whereas running, you can go basically to wherever you are as long as you're on earth and there's land.
Totally.
So yeah, I ran a lot and, I didn't excel in it in the beginning. So I would say I didn't focus on it as heavily, but you're right. You know, a lot of different variables come into play for you to actually like devote yourself to that one goal.
Yeah. And I think not everybody, you know, like you said, it's abnormal. And I think not everybody, and I think you being somebody who loves a lot of things and loves a lot of people and loves to, you know, you have the craziest FOMO of anybody I've ever met. You know, if you're not doing something, you have to be, you're like sad.
Yeah. I really want to be a part of it.
Yeah. And I think for me, I never had that. I was kind of like a loner, you know, and I kind of had my own thing that I was doing kind of all the time from when I was a little kid.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I think, you know, it's easy for me to find the running because I was like, oh, I fit here. You know, but for you love to fit everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, where I kind of was ambivalent. You know, I was like, you know, I don't really need to do that.
So you put like a heavier weight on what you just felt the innate desire to do.
Yeah. It was like definitely intrinsically driven.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that actually is perfect leading into my last question of this interview, which is, you know, from my perspective, you always seem like you know where you're headed and like what you want to do next. And for somebody like me, I'm like, how does anyone know exactly like so viscerally like what their next move is going to be? And so I guess that's my question for you is what do you think, what in your mind or soul or body or whatever, what drives you so like with such surety that you're going to go to this next step?
Yeah, it's so funny because it like that fire that we talked about when I was younger, that drove me to do everything that I did. You know, I'd kind of wait. It's, you know, it was almost like a metal detector where it's like beep 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 beep, and then you go over the thing again, beep 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 beep, and I just kind of wait for the thing that I'd like think about a bunch of different things, and I'd wait for the thing that just made me really, really excited.
Wow. So you just literally followed excitement.
Yeah, I followed
to success.
And just, obviously like followed up with a lot of hard work. But I'd like think about what I wanted to do, and I'd commit to doing it, and then I would figure out the steps to get there.
Yeah.
And then once I figured out those steps, I would do them. I think that's the most important thing, is like I would drop everything and and make sure I did them. I think I really love the work. I think I'm a total workhorse, and so I think when I find the thing that I want to do, I'll make it work, just because I am so stubborn. And I enjoy the process of, no matter what I'm doing, if I see an end goal, I like the process of getting there.
Yeah.
So.
And you're very independent, a very independent thinker, which I think also plays into it, because in our high school, you said you were getting in trouble for not going to class, which is like, and for me, it's like, how could you not go to class? Like in high school, I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to get in trouble, I'm going to go to class. And also, like, I don't want my people to get mad at me, my parents or whatever. And you literally kind of made your own value system of like, okay, well, running is the most important thing, or this is the most important thing, or whatever, playing outside in nature. So instead of going to class, it's more important for me to run up that mountain.
Yeah, and I don't think necessarily that was a good thing, the going to class part. I think I think that was a symptom of other stuff going on. That I just like couldn't cope, and so I wasn't going to class. And I think running turned out, I think the way that I got there was good. And reflecting on it, I think running just turned into that way to cope. Like I didn't know how to cope, and so I was not going to class and getting in trouble because I was just like, rah,
Running became your cigarette.
Yeah, running. That's a great analogy. It totally became my cigarette.
Wow.
I was running before school. I was running after school. I was like running after practice.
That's crazy.
I just like needed it. Like,
honestly, it's such a good coping tool, because I have been in that same place. I've been so depressed after getting concussed in Jackson Hole, and like running helped pull me out of the pit. And I was in bad shape. I wasn't happy. I was like barely hanging on. So when I got back into running, and this is after I got my heart patched up, so it was like I was efficient, and I was like, wow, I'm like slowly improving. I can see, as like one like very solid, stable, static thing that I could like do every day, and feel like I was improving.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, totally.
Did I interrupt you? I'm sorry. What were you about to say?
I don't remember. It's all right.
So basically, it sounds like you just followed excitement, and then you tried to stay on that goal.
Yeah, I think I just I chose what excited me and followed it up with hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that definitely has changed as I've gotten a little older. I definitely am a little bit more methodical, and I had to choose running again. There was a big period around 2023 where I seriously questioned whether I wanted to keep doing this or not. Because I was so out of shape. Everything was hard. I knew I was at risk of losing sponsorship if I didn't race soon, but I wasn't ready to race. And I just saw kind of what you were doing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't living as regimented because I was injured. And I was kind of seeing you just say yes to all these things, like going surfing, midnight surfing, under a full moon, hanging out later with friends. We, one night during this, because I wasn't training, we just ended up we went for a night walk on the beach and ended up at like a beach fire and had a couple drinks with some friends. And those are things that I wouldn't have done before and wouldn't do now. And so I saw that and I was like, man, is this something that I want to do? And ultimately I did, after a lot of, about a year of just meditating on it. So, it's not so much that burning fire of passion that it was, but I think it's like a simmering passion of loving the process, enjoying getting better, deeply, deeply caring about not so much, where before I think it was, the passion was intrinsic. The goals were definitely race goals. And now they still are, but it's not like if I don't win this race, it was all for nothing. Like before I was like, so I was sure I was going to do it, but I'm not sure what would have happened if I didn't win,
Well, before it seems like you were so focused on the next, like that season or like the following year, because like you're like, I want to keep doing this, but if I lose a sponsor, like it could, like this thing could come crumbling down. But now your goals are like longer term and more stable.
I definitely feel more stable. The thing about a hot burning fire is that it is not stable. You really have to put guardrails around that. And so now I'm able to make wiser decisions, and it is a lot more sustainable. It definitely feels healthier.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I always think about that quote. I forget who initially said this, that humans always underestimate what they can do, or they overestimate what you can do in 1 year and you underestimate what you can do in 10. Yeah. And so like, a couple of years ago, you were expecting to start crushing some very competitive races the following year.
Yeah.
While your body was hurting and broken.
I mean, I was signed up for UTMB in 2023 and pulled out. After I realized, the doctor was like, you're not going to be able to do that. And I was like,
are you calling me doctor now?
Well, you also said that first. But
no, I'm just messing.
I know.
Cool. So, well, thank you for the interview.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Fans, listeners, did you enjoy the interview? Is there any other questions that you think you have for Kat? Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, let us know in the comments or DMs. You can DM either me or Carson, or the comments in Spotify is also great because it helps us be seen. But anyway, we'll answer some of the questions that you guys dropped in my DMs in the last couple days. Do you want? Oh, I guess I'll do one because we have done a lot of talking. But I mean, a lot of them are for me. Oh, here's one from Davo Sauce. What is your favorite type of cross training?
What is your favorite type of cross training?
I honestly, I don't cross train that much. I lift, but I'm what they call a purist.
AKA injury prone.
Yeah, AKA I just really like to run, and I only cross train if I have to.
You have done ellipticals and
bike.
And this Peloton right here, which is pretty good.
Yeah, the ellipticals collecting dust. I've been on that thing like twice. But but the Peloton I use for heat training. Before I race in Thailand, I was putting it, and I use it when I have to. Like, that's why we have it, is because there's been a couple instances where I've had to take like a week off running, and then the Peloton's really great to have here. Because the only gym around here is Turtle Bay, which is the hotel. Yeah, so good questions. Another one is from... Ooh, maybe you can help answer this one. Is what are some tips for road marathoners to take their first steps into ultras? As somebody who you didn't do any road marathons first, but you took a big leap into ultras.
I mean, I started with that road 50K.
Oh yeah.
Which was mostly is net downhill. I think it was difficult. And I wore these I didn't know anything. I was such a dummy.
I know. I just messaged you and I was like, hey, want to run a 50K? I'm coming to visit.
Yeah, I was like, oh, sure, let's try it. And then I wore these super knobby trail shoes on the road for 50K. And it was, by the end of it, my big toe on my right side was completely numb. And I was like, I don't think that's supposed to happen. Did I mess myself up permanently? But it wasn't permanent. So anyways, to get into an ultra, you know, I'd say sign up for one that you think you can get support at. And, you know, one that you think you might be able to convince a friend to do with you. Because for me, having, like Kat mentioned earlier, I have FOMO a lot of times. So like for me, having a friend there, I actually found this ultra that my friend, my coworker who I used to guide rafts with, she told me about, called the Never Summer 100K.
Yeah, shout out Nick Clark.
And yeah.
And our runners. It's an awesome race. One of my favorite. I've never actually done it, but I've paced it a bunch of times and marked the course. Brutal, you know, 14,000 feet of elevation gain, all above like 8,000 feet. Mm-hmm. Freaking gnarly first 100K.
It was really hard. And, but you know, it was like the weekend of my birthday. So I got to convince some of my friends to come and crew me. And then my good buddy Bo, I was like, yo, come run this thing with me for my birthday.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. And he did it. Dude, like he was knocking on heaven's door like around mile 50 and like rolling around having an exorcism kind of experience. And then he actually got back up and finished the race and made it in an hour before cutoff.
Yeah.
Within 23 hours. And honestly, that's
such
impressive. A powerful move. But yeah, I really think having support there. Kat also was able to pace me the last 15 miles. If you're able to find support and a pacer and set a goal and buy a ticket, because for me, when I buy in and I'm committed,
you'll do the training.
Game on. Like I'm more focused on the training if I am committed to a big goal.
Yeah, I would say find a good community too. I know that's not always accessible for people who are, you know, are super busy. You know, I have one athlete in New Jersey that just, you know, there's not a lot of ultra runners by him, or not a lot of trail runners even. And so it's really hard for him to get out. But you can find online communities too. You know, I think Facebook groups are awesome. Just like look up like trail or ultra running group New Jersey, and there's going to be a whole group of ultra runners, and you guys, even if you don't get to run together often, you know, just having a couple other people there is super helpful. Listen to podcasts. You know, there's so much information out there on pretty much every single race. And you can learn the course, learn kind of what to do, how to pace yourselves. I also highly recommend getting a coach. You know, AI can help you figure out how to train, but coaches can help you figure out what to expect and what's normal and what's not in training, and you know, why certain things are happening in your body, or like how to adjust your training based on this, and what to expect like at mile 25, mile 50, mile 80. And just, you know, having a sounding board. For me, I'm a coach who needs a coach, because I need to outsource my own things. So I'm not going down wormholes, and I don't spend too much time spiraling. Like, am I doing the right thing? Am I not? Mm-hmm. So that's my recommendation. And start slow. I wouldn't like just sign up for a 100-miler, even though that's what I did. You know, I'd sign up for a 50K first, and then you'll meet some people there. And I think that's crucial.
Yeah. Great question.
Yeah. Great question. You know, I've gotten a couple of these questions are advice on how to make a living as a runner doing big projects. And another person is how I scored the Satisfy gig. And I think that's, and I probably get a message a week, a DM a week, like, how do I become a pro runner? And it's really hard in the ultra running community. And I am super lucky that, you know, in 2017, I won a big race that I've been, you know, and I followed it up with other races, but it has helped. But I think if you're in it to become a pro and to make it your living, you're not going to make it. You know, anytime I've made it about making a lot of money or being something for the sake of it, it hasn't worked. But the times that I've put the goals out there and asked myself, how am I going to make it work? Or made it work like around anything. Like when I won Western, I was teaching, you know, and I was up at 4 a.m. every day, and I didn't have funding, and I was like broke, busy, and tired, you know, and it worked then. And I think the key is do the thing first and keep doing the thing and be super passionate. And then when you're really good at the thing, then the funding will come, and then it'll open your opportunities and you'll be able to do stuff with that. But, you know, I think a great example is, I think his name's Cody Barr. He's the guy, he's, making a bunch of YouTube videos right now for David Roach. And he just started taking photos at races, and just would show up to races, take photos, and give them out for free, and did that for several years just because he loved it. He loved taking photos, and then got some amazing photos of David Roach winning Leadville. And because those photos were so great and he met the right people, he all of a sudden got funding to do this amazing project with the feed, making all of these videos for David Roach. And I think like that's the thing, is you just are super passionate, and if you keep doing it for the right reasons, then the sponsorships will come. And one of these guys were specifically saying like he wants to make money running, but he doesn't want to do it racing. He wants to just do big projects. Do the big projects. You know, I think Tara Dower is another awesome example. You know, she did have a sponsor, but you know, she just broke the overall FKT on the Appalachian Trail. And while she was sponsored, she was not getting that much support. You know, she did it with her friends, filmed with her iPhone, and did it for no reason other than it was that goal. And then the funding and stuff for her future goals came after that. But she didn't do it for that reason. So I think, you know, the reason that you do something, especially in this sport, should not be to get sponsored. It should not be to make money.
But there is the value of actually having a sponsor. Like you've had lots of different types of sponsors.
That's true.
You tell me about she used to have a frosting sponsor who would give you free frosting, which is hilarious, but it actually was like a big source of calories for you for a little while. But
totally.
It wasn't healthy
every day. Yeah, it wasn't healthy. But that wasn't paid. I didn't start getting paid anything until Western. And I was still...
That will be the case for a lot of people if they start getting product or something. But like, would you like ask? Do you ask people to sponsor you? And like, did you ask them to sponsor you? Or
yeah. So when I was early, I was just like reaching out to anybody and asking for product, and because I couldn't afford stuff, I needed gear. And
you were working full time as a teacher and running as much as you could. So then you would ask people to help you with your running.
Yeah, exactly. And I was trying to get my master's too at the time, which I never finished. But I would just ask brands. I mean, the frosting sponsor, they reached out to me, but that was from being in the industry and the community already for a while. You know, I'd already put down a bunch of solid results at that point. Yeah. Not just like any one big thing. I was just like more of a local, runner at that point.
So it's like get connected.
Yeah, get connected.
If it's not racing, then maybe it's, doing more like video work and like publishing a lot, In the surfing world, a lot of the guys and girls that are able to be pros, even if they're not like on the circuit full time, a lot of them put out media content like on their channels every day.
Yeah. And if you want to learn more about that, I highly recommend, and I'm wanting to be better about content. And so I'm listening to this podcast called Second Nature. I forget the guy who hosts it, but it's Aaron Lutz maybe. And he used to be the athlete manager at Red Bull, and he's super into content creation and long-term format and working with brands on this. And there's a lot of good resources out there. So learn, ask for help, where you get it, but don't expect anything. You know, I think the important thing is do it because you love it. Do it because every single day, even if there was no money involved, you would do it. And just like that guy, Cody Bear, you know, I hope that's his name. But that photographer, he was just taking photos at races because he loved it and he loved capturing it. And I forget his name, Mike something, Shit in the Woods is his Instagram. Again, just took the most amazing photos, and I don't think he was getting paid for it until pretty recently, you know, but I read this post from him once that was like, I started taking photos because I was looking at trail running photos and I saw nothing that looked as cool as it felt. So he wanted to bring to light how cool trail running was. So, yeah, whatever you're thinking, do the thing, you know, do the thing, do it well, do it because you love it. And then, resources will come, you know, if you just keep at it. And if you're like a mosquito and keep, maybe that's not the right analogy. Maybe if you're like a honeybee and you just keep creating honey, at first it's a little bit of honey and then all of a sudden you have a lot of honey and people want to buy it. Is that better?
I want to be a mosquito. First, you just take a little nibble, and then by the end of it, you're just sucking the blood right out of them. I'm just playing. Okay. That was a really good question, though, because I was curious about that, too. I'm like, how the heck do you make a living at that? That was one of my questions for her, like, several years back. I was like, people will pay you to do this? Like, I don't even understand that. But generally, like, yeah, it's all about, like, you know, if you're in the game and people recognize you and people start realizing like, oh, Kat's running for Satisfy, like what kind of shirt is that? That shirt actually looks pretty cool. And you know, people talk to her about what her opinion is in the sport and want to get her opinion. And so you can do that online too, just by posting cool content.
Yeah I think that we're in a cool era where there's a lot of different types of opportunities, and if the opportunity doesn't fit you, then create something for yourself. I think if you are doing something well and super passionate, people are going to want to listen. You know, you don't have to fit in to any current mold that exists. You know, but it is, I will tell you, as somebody who works full time, runs a lot, and is trying to do content, it's a lot of freaking work, but it also doesn't come naturally to me. Yeah.
Working?
No, the making content, like outside.
The content. The content is tough.
Yeah.
And I've been helping a little bit with that, but
I know you help a lot. Your content is always the best.
No. Okay. Next question.
Well, I think we should talk a little bit about how'd you score the Satisfy gig. It's even the same. It's like the same, but a little bit. But we can talk about how that relationship kind of started. I found out through the grapevine that they were interested in sponsoring me. They were inquiring whether my contract with Brooks was up, and I jumped on that opportunity. I heard about them briefly a couple weeks before. My friend Abby, who is the editor-in-chief at Outside, which is, you know, formerly Trail Runner Mag, they'd contacted her wanting to send her stuff, and was telling me about just like, you know, running chat, telling me about this brand. Saw what they were into, saw what they were about, and it really vibed with me. I liked that it was angsty, you know. I liked that it was a little punk rock. I could see myself in that, and I felt like in some of the apparel that I was wearing before, I didn't feel like it represented me, and I feel like this represents me, and that was really cool. And so I reached out. I basically sent them a love letter, and then negotiations started, and that was pretty cool.
Punk rock and love letters.
Let's go. Yeah. And passion. Cool. Well, I think this is a good one. 2 weeks till race day. How to improve fitness in this time, how to focus. I like this one because coaches will hate this, because 2 weeks is really not enough time to make any meaningful fitness gains from a cardiovascular perspective, but you can gain a lot from an efficiency perspective and a musculoskeletal perspective. I'm not sure what type of race that you're doing, so it'll vary depending, but if I were you, I'd do some strides. I do a lot of strides, some maybe like fast, short efforts, focusing on efficiency. I'm talking like 20 to 40 seconds, maybe even slightly downhill with full rest, focusing on power. And I do 2 weeks is not a lot of time. It's a delicate balance of how much can I push myself without, you don't want to still be trying to make those adaptations on race day. So you want to, you don't want to do a super long run or anything, but you can do, again, depending on your level, depending on your, what race you're doing, an effort, safe bet is 90 minutes, with some good hard downhill, but I wouldn't do that any later than 10 days out. Depending on how fast you recover. If you're a pretty experienced athlete, you can do it 7 days out, a good hard downhill effort. But I'd say, 14 to 10 days out, you can do like a good 90-minute effort with half of it blasting downhill. And that's a high risk workout. So if you're injury prone, maybe just stick to like 40 seconds downhill strides. But, you really want to make those fitness gains, those meaningful cardiovascular fitness gains like 6 weeks before. Nerd talk.
Yep. Whatever she just said.
Yeah. The things that you can focus on with 2 weeks out are the logistics. What are you going to eat during the race? And I have my athletes 2 weeks out, they send me a full blown nutrition plan that like, what are they going to eat? What exactly are they going to eat? Aid station to aid station. And then we look at it together. And then I'm like, okay, what happens if this goes wrong? What happens if this goes wrong? What happens if you can't eat this gel anymore? And then so they make B and C plans based on that, including hydration too, like how much you're going to drink between aid stations. And then if you're running an ultra, a really good way to remember that, well, you're not going to remember that, is make a spreadsheet, take a screenshot of what you're going to do, have some sort of color coding, and then put it on your screensaver on your phone so you can just look at it. To remind you. That's what I do. Wow.
I hope you're taking notes. Kat's just dropping knowledge bombs for free right now.
Yeah. I could talk about this stuff all day. Yeah. So more questions because, this is, I do love to do this. Cool. I think that's about it. Any other, what we should end on is we got one question. Describe the pecking order at Pipeline and describe like why Pipeline is so meaningful.
Oh man, Pipeline, why it's meaningful?
Yeah, like describe the wave, why it's so meaningful there, why everybody wants to go there, and then describe the pecking order.
Yeah, it's like if you've ever seen a video of it, and it's really good conditions and the waves are big, like there's so many people out. Sometimes there's like, 50, 60, I've seen up to 100 people out there, which is insane. It's like just it's a wave that has a right or a left. Pipeline is the left and then backdoor is the right. So it's a right and a left. And sometimes it's, only the left, or it depends on the wave that comes in. But it's, one of the world's best barrels, which is why everyone wants to ride it, because it's like such an amazing wave. The reason why it's such an amazing wave is because of the underwater topography, the way the reef is, and the wave comes in from the northwest. It's like, that general the angle that the surf comes in from, it hits this reef, and then the wave jacks up, and then it peaks in one spot, and then and it gets pretty shallow there, which is why it barrels so much. All that water has to go somewhere. When the amount of when the water gets shallower, all that energy in the wave has to go above the water because there's so much energy there. So that's where it like comes out of the water and then it breaks. And because it's kind of shallow, it barrels, and you can get into that barrel and surf it. But since it's so shallow, it's very dangerous, because if thinking about how much water weighs. It's like eight pounds per gallon, and thousands of gallons coming over a wave and driving into hitting the water and then driving deep into the water. And so if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or if you go over the falls on that lip and you get drilled down into the ground, it can be anywhere from 7 or 8 feet deep. There's other spots, especially a back door, where it's like a foot deep on the inside, and a lot of places where it's like 3, 4, 5 feet deep, which isn't that deep when there's a giant amount of water driving you into it, into the rocks. So
yeah, I mean, it's pipeline. That wave is right by a bike path that I run at least twice a week for my flat runs, and dozens of broken boards there. Every week I see, during the wintertime, I see blood, ambulances, people messed up. I've seen the best surfers in the world in person just on my run, just getting drilled. It's intense. It's scary.
Yeah, it's scary. And one of the biggest dangers about it is that there's so many people there trying to surf it. And so it's one of those waves where it's very critical. It's a very difficult wave. It's very advanced. And if there was nobody out there surfing it, it would be much simpler to like pick your wave, decide to paddle for it, catch it, and take off. And if you're a really good surfer, you can make the drop and ride the wave. But because it's so crowded, not only do you have to focus on riding the wave and catching the wave, but you have to focus on whether there's anyone else that is also going to be on the wave or deeper than you. And by deeper, I mean the wave peaks at a certain point, and where the peak is where it throws over first. That's called the peak of the wave. So like when the wave breaks, it throws over, where it's like the tallest, the first place to break is the peak. So whoever's at the very center peak first typically has the right of way. And so if there's somebody just to the right of the peak and just to the left of the peak, typically those people will each go their separate ways. If the guy on the right of the peak decides, oh, I'm going to go left and I'm behind the peak, that's where it can get kind of messy of like whose priority was it. And hopefully those two surfers are communicating with each other. Like, you going left, I'm going right. And then they both go their separate ways. But if they don't communicate, and if it's just like, that's where it can get kind of fuzzy, because some people out there have been surfing there a lot longer than others. And so some people out there think like, okay, well, I'm going on this one. This is my wave. I'm going to take it. And maybe they're behind the peak, or for whatever reason they take it, and the other person on the wave thinks it's theirs, and maybe it's not theirs. That's where it gets really tricky. And the pecking order out there is largely based on like who's been out there surfing the longest, who's a well-known face in the crowd. Yeah,
because they'll all kind of protect the peak, right?
I mean, yeah, it basically like it's such a dense takeoff zone where like the peak breaks. A lot of the more senior surfers that have been surfing at that break for a long time, or maybe their whole lives, they like to hang out in that one specific like optimum spot. And then if there's a big wave, like they'll kind of take turns amongst each other.
And then what you do is you watch to see if anybody's gotten it. You'll be a little bit deeper, and if nobody gets it, you'll take off on it.
Not exactly. Okay. So basically like similar, yeah, kind of like that. But so if it's really busy and there's a lot of people like right there at the peak, I'll probably be off to the side a little bit. And not every single wave breaks right there. Some of them break in a different spot, like it shifts around just a tiny bit. And so if a wave, like one of the other ones come and breaks in a slightly different spot, I will be in the right place for it. So generally it's complicated based on, to figure out who has the right of way on the wave. But generally, if you're at the peak and you're paddling for it first and you're stand up first, it's your wave. That being said, you kind of have to be careful out there because there's a lot of super high level surfers that are very intense about getting their wave, and they know how to operate in a really busy crowd because they grew up surfing one of the most popular waves in the world. And if you wipe out there in the wrong way, it can be really dangerous consequences.
Yeah. So Carson wears a helmet.
Yeah, at Pipeline, I almost always wear a helmet.
Yeah. Well, cool. Keep the surf questions coming. I think, one of the biggest pieces of feedback was when you were talking about wave science a little bit. People were like, that was my favorite part of the pod. So maybe we end a little bit on surfing every time.
Oh, wow. That's fun.
Or sometimes. Yeah. Well, thanks, guys, for listening. Let me know what you want to hear. This is super fun for us, and we want it to be fun for you, too. So anything that you can do to support, whether that's telling a friend, whether that's giving it some stars, let us know, honestly, though. So if it's not good, still hit 5, just kidding. But comment, share, whatever you guys want to do. And seriously, these questions are fun, so hit us up.
Yeah, thank you. Aloha, everybody.
Aloha.
Bye.
Bye.